All right, let's talk about a problem at work that so many of us have felt but maybe couldn't quite put a name to. It's that boss, the one who isn't a monster, they might even be nice, but they somehow leave you feeling completely drained, anxious, and just stuck. So let's just dive right into a scene. I bet this is going to sound familiar to a lot of you. It's that feeling, right? You're spinning your wheels, you're trying so hard to do a good job, but it feels like your own manager is making it 10 times harder, even though they're perfectly pleasant about it. It almost always starts with something like this. You get an assignment with these really fuzzy, vague instructions, but the expectation for a perfect polished result, oh, that's crystal clear. So you're left just guessing, basically trying to read their mind, knowing all the pressure is on you to somehow get it right. And it's never just one thing, is it? The pattern starts to show up everywhere. They hold back key information you absolutely need. When a project gets stressful, they're nowhere to be found. Or, my personal favorite, they wait until you're done to point out all the flaws, using information they never gave you in the first place. And when a big, tough decision needs to be made, poof, they're gone. Okay, so here's the big reveal. These behaviors, they aren't just random quirks of a bad boss. They're actually symptoms. They all point to a single, specific, underlying problem, a dynamic that we can actually name and understand, and that problem is called managerial dependency. Honestly, once you hear this term, it kind of changes how you see everything. It helps you move past just being frustrated and start to see the hidden structure of what's really going on. So, what does it mean? Let's get specific. Managerial dependency is when a manager keeps all of their authority, the title, the power, the final say, but they push the actual work of their role down onto you. They outsource the responsibility, the stress, and the hard thinking to their team. They get the credit, you get the burden. Here's a great way to think about it. Being a manager has actual costs. There's the mental cost of deep thinking, the pressure cost of making tough decisions, and the communication cost of explaining why you're doing something. A dependent boss just shifts those costs from their own desk right onto yours. Now, this is really, really important to get. We're not talking about evil villains here. Most of the time, this is totally unconscious. It's not coming from a place of malice. It's driven by their own stuff, their anxieties, their fear of being wrong, or maybe they just were never taught how to manage. They're not trying to make your life harder. They're trying to make their own life easier. Okay, so let's really break this down. What does a dependent boss actually look like in the wild? Well, this behavior tends to show up in three common archetypes. As we go through them, see if one of them sounds familiar. First up, we have the vague director. The psychology here is simple. They're afraid of being judged. See, if they give you a clear, direct order, that decision can be evaluated. It might be wrong. So by stating vague, they avoid ever having to be held accountable. And the impact on you? Well, you waste so much energy trying to find the right answer that doesn't exist, your confidence takes a nosedive, and pretty soon you just stop taking risks at all. Next, you've got the information gatekeeper. This manager's whole deal is that information equals power. They're often worried about their team knowing more than them or, God forbid, outshining them. So what happens to you? You're forced to make huge decisions with only half the story. You start to distrust them, you feel isolated, and the whole team just stops learning because no one is sharing anything. And finally, there's the emotionally avoidant boss. This is the manager who just can't deal with the messy human side of work. They lack emotional intelligence. To them, your stress or anxiety, that's your problem to manage, not theirs. And the result? It creates this culture of fear where no one wants to admit they're struggling, creativity totally disappears, and the risk of burnout just goes through the roof. So, you see the pattern here, right? Whether it's the vagueness, the gatekeeping, or the emotional avoidance, it all comes down to the same thing. They're all just different ways of outsourcing the real, difficult work of management directly onto your plate. And this really is the central idea for today. The fundamental job of a good manager is to be a kind of shock absorber. They absorb the complexity, the uncertainty, and the stress so that their team has the clarity to actually do the work. A dependent manager does the exact opposite. They act like an amplifier, taking all that pressure and passing it right down the line. And we can actually put a name to these costs that you're forced to pay. First, there's the thinking cost. You're the one who has to come up with the actual plan. Second, the decision cost. You're pushed into making tough calls way above your pay grade. Third, the explanation cost. You end up having to explain the strategy to everyone else. And finally, there's the emotional cost. You have to manage your own stress and your team's, all without any support from above. So you're probably thinking, okay, if this is so obviously destructive, why does it feel like it's everywhere? And the uncomfortable answer is that some organizations, some company cultures, actually end up rewarding this behavior. And it happens for a few really common reasons. People get promoted because they were great at their last job, not because they actually know how to manage people. Sometimes a company will praise ambiguity and call it strategic. And a lot of the time, there's just no real system in place to evaluate managers on how well they, manage. This can create this weird reverse selection process, where the bosses who are best at offloading their work are the ones who look productive and keep climbing the ladder. So let's tie this all together, because now that you can see the pattern, we've got to talk about the most crucial and honestly the most surprising part of this whole dynamic, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. And here it is. This is the big, mind-bending paradox. The better you are at your job, the more competent, the more patient, the more proactive you are, the more you enable a dependent boss. Every single time you fill in the gaps for them, make that decision they're avoiding, or calm down an anxious teammate, you're basically teaching them that their behavior works. Your own competence is reinforcing their dependency. So what in the world are you supposed to do? Well, first, you can run a little test. Start asking for more clarity. Ask for specifics. Push for a final decision. And then just watch how they react. A secure, effective manager will welcome it. A dependent one will probably get defensive. And remember, asking for what you need to do your job is not rebellion. It's you helping them be a better manager. But, and this is a big but, if the pattern just doesn't change, you have to be honest with yourself. You may need to get out before you completely burn out. And that's really what I want to leave you with today. As you think about all this, ask yourself one really powerful question. Is my own hard work, my own desire to do a good job, actually fueling the very cycle that's draining me? It is a tough, tough question for sure. But answering it is the very first step to taking back your energy and your career.